Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining our Election Know Your Rights training. Today, I'll be facilitating the conversation, and thank you all for joining this call in the midst of some very turbulent days leading up to the election. Today on the call with us to help us understand what are the risks at stake for us as voters leading up to the election and in the days after, we have Kifah Shah and Nusayba Mubarak. Kifah Shah is the co-author of Hold the Line, A Guide to Defending Democracy, and a senior campaign manager at MPower Change. Her work spans across multiple industries and geographies. She's worked for the Asian Law Caucus clergy and USAID. Kifah is a TED resident on the Board of Trustees for the Sabika for Peace Foundation and holds a master's in public administration and economic policy from the London School of Economics. Kifah, thank you so much for joining us today. Take it away and tell us what we need to know about this upcoming election.
Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks a lot, Atiya. It's really nice to be here with everyone today. So I am going to present a little bit of what we have in the Hold the Line guide. So bear with me. Atiya, can you see this?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Welcome, everyone. So my name, like Atiya mentioned, is Kifah Shah. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm speaking to everyone from Washington Heights, New York City, occupied Lenape land. I co-wrote this guide with Mariam Naveed, Hardy Merriman, and Ankar Astanna, and we formed because when we saw federal forces being deployed against protesters in Washington, D.C. by the current administration, it was cause for pause and also a bit of alarm, because although we have maybe seen things like this in our country's past, we know that these are sort of tactics that authoritarian rulers usually use. And so because we know that 2020 is anything but business as usual, it was really important to consider what are the ways that certain things might change for the 2020 elections. And we started thinking about this in spring of this year and released this guide at holdthelineguide.com. And some of the scenarios that we outline in the guide are things that I'll talk about today. So when we talk about the first scenario that we might see after Election Day, it's that Election Day results are unclear, but Trump declares victory anyway. This means that, on Election Day itself, when the polls close on November 3rd, we might not know who the clear winner is. And there's going to be many, many mail-in ballots that remain uncounted. But what we know, and what we know from Twitter, is that the current administration might still declare itself victor, with Trump declaring himself president. And the second scenario that we might see is that Election Day results show irregularities or signs of tampering, and Trump still declares victory. If there are irregularities, if there's manipulation of vote counting or possible vote hacking, then we need to make sure that those irregularities are remedied, and that the election, any of those irregularities also need to be investigated and remedied as best and as quickly and as transparently as possible, even if Trump declares himself victory. And then the third scenario that we might see is that Trump loses the election but then refuses to leave office. The official results on election day or night, election night, or the days thereafter might actually show that Trump did lose the election, but we know that he might not concede, and he might also claim that there's voter fraud, something that he's time and time again foreshadowed towards, and we need to stay aware that that also might be something that we see after November 3rd. In all of these scenarios, it's also really important for us as everyday people to remember that no matter what we see, there are going to be people who might attack us, or they're not to cause alarm, but again, there might be incidents of violence that occur. And so that's why the model that we use is one of nonviolent civil resistance. Maybe after hearing about those scenarios, you're thinking, well, how do we know if and when it's time to act? And when we're talking about protecting democracy, how do we know what we should do? So one thing that I want to say before I talk about this is that, we acknowledge that we do not live in a perfect system. We acknowledge that not everybody is enfranchised in this democracy, and we know that it's a complicated one. And we also know that there's a lot of work that remains to be done in the way of democracy in this country, and including everybody in it. But when we talk about preserving it, it's because we know that it's a system that needs to be improved and one that should not be subject to authoritarian tactics. So you might be wondering, how do we know when it's time to act? And also, if it's time to act, what are we supposed to do, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. This is a timeline of important dates, and I'm just going to cover a couple of them. So we know that the polls close on November 3rd, and on December 8th, which is 35 days after the polls close, you have something that's called the safe harbor deadline. And the safe harbor deadline is when states must resolve disputes over which ballots to count and report the final totals or risk their electoral college votes not being counted by Congress. So that means, especially in this 35-day period, you, as an everyday person, as somebody who's really concerned, as somebody who wants to really make sure every ballot is counted, this is the key time period that you come into play. This is the period that you have to think through, well, how can I do election defense work at a local level to make sure every ballot will be counted before this deadline? Because then on December 14th, the deadline for the governors to report election results will come, right? And in each state, the governors are going to have to send what's called a certificate of ascertainment to Congress, reporting which candidate of the state, returning which candidate won that state. And the Electoral College will also meet, and in each state, the winning candidate slate of pledged electors will cast their votes and send their votes to Congress. And then at that point, it moves on to the national level. So for you, if you're at home wondering what to do, consider the first period of this timeline as the most important and most relevant to you to take action. And when we think about all of these scenarios and the action that you could take, it's about what can you do to prevent the issue? How can you really step into the power that you already have? Are you part of your mutual aid group? Are you part of your mosque? Are you part of a local chapter of CAIR? Like, how can you get involved and work with the organizations that you're already integral to ensure that you're doing your part to make sure that every single ballot will be counted? And there's ways that you can respond, and they're all rooted in, civil resistance. So when we talk about civil resistance, we're talking about the fact that it's a way for people to wield power without using violence, right? And here we know that there's acts of commission, which is basically, acts of commission are basically things that you do you're committing acts and you're taking on a proactive strategy. So you're going to do a sit-in, or you're going to do a march, or you're going to do a walkout, right? And acts of omission are when you decide to do a boycott. So at your local levels, you can utilize different tactics to really make sure to put pressure on the local power holders that you have, and make sure that they're guaranteeing that they'll count every ballot. And that's because the model of change that we're working on in Hold the Line is that we know that power holders will depend on our obedience. We know that the only way that the system is upheld and the status quo exists is because of our cooperation, right? So when we do acts of non-cooperation, non-violent non-cooperation at local levels, at micro levels, it really does cause a wave. It causes a flood. It affects the meta level, right? So what that means that if you, again, involve yourself in strikes and boycotts and other tactics, you can do something to shift the balance of power if and when any of those scenarios arise. So we know that power always assumes that we think of it as top down, but actually we as organizers and everyday people know that we can do something to shift the balances of power because power actually exists from us, from the bottom up. And if it comes time in any of those scenarios to demonstrate our power when we're organized, when we're strategic, and we're skillful, we can make sure to shift the balance of power and win that contest. So how do we do that? To close, I'm going to quickly go through how you can form an election protection group. So if you're sitting at home and you're really concerned and you want to start getting involved, one, read the Hold the Line guide, right? Go to holdthelineguide.org and read it, and then start a team. And when you start a team, share these scenarios with them. And when you share these scenarios with them, think about the lines that we say must not be crossed in the guide, right? One is that every single vote has to be counted without any interference or intimidation. 2 is that if there are incidents of voter fraud, if there's any voter suppression or any other irregularities, then they need to be investigated impartially and remedied. And then the 3rd is that if the true election results, whatever they are, no matter the outcome, they need to be respected. Because again, we're talking about upholding a certain process and not necessarily campaigning for one candidate or another. So when you form your election protection group and when you look at the guide, you'll see that we talk about how to start power mapping and looking at your power holders locally, especially at a county and a state level, to make sure that they're going to count every ballot. And then you're going to think through what are the tactics that you can use. Again, boycott, sit-ins, petitions, call-in actions. These are all things that are useful when you're trying to urge a power holder to commit to upholding a process and making sure every ballot is counted. Make sure that you review your plans thoroughly together as a group. And then you can also turn to our commitment to uphold democracy, which is a template that you can use to urge your local power holders to commit to upholding that every single ballot would be counted. You can see that document on holdthelineguide.com. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak to you today, and I hope that all of this was helpful information. If you want to get in touch and reach out to me by email, you can contact me at defend@holdthelineguide.org, and we can have a conversation. Thanks.
Kifah, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I'm now going to introduce Nusaiba, who's our second panelist for today. As a voter mobilization manager at MoveOn, Nusaiba mobilizes voters in battleground states through data research-driven strategies. Previously, she served as a national Muslim organizer and political coordinator for Bernie 2020. In over 10 years of organizing, Nusaiba has built strategies to advocate for Muslim communities and communities of color. Nusaiba holds a master's degree in sociology from Georgia State University. Nusaiba, thank you so much for being here to share your wisdom with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Atiya. I really appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So happy to be speaking with you all. As Kifah said, we really need to protect the results this election. And if Trump announces anything that would undermine the election results, for example, telling states to stop counting, we will need mass mobilization efforts. And in just a moment, I'll share how you can join or host an action in your city. Now, the states that we're especially keeping a close eye on are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and Georgia. And that's because these are our battleground states. And we're especially keeping a close eye on Pennsylvania and Michigan because we know that they won't start counting mail-in ballots until election night. And we need to make sure that every vote is counted. Now, in terms of the actions, the big days of action, we anticipate and we know that the 2 big days of action will be on November 4th and November 7th. And most likely, considering the scenarios that Kifah shared, they will likely be rallies to protect and count every vote in a contested scenario. And where will these actions be taking place? They'll be taking place at Board of Elections offices, Capitol buildings, city halls, parks, or town squares. And now, just as I said, I'll share how you can join or host an action. You can go to protecttheresults.com and sign up for an action, join an action, or host an action in your city, no matter where you are. So even if you're not in any of those battleground states, even if you're in a small city, a really small town, we need actions in every part of the country in order to protect the results. So you can go to protecttheresults.com and sign up. Now, what will these actions look like? They are mass mobilizations, nonviolent actions, again, in big cities, small towns, and everything in between. And there are also opportunities to create joy, right? We want to celebrate each other, celebrate our diversity, celebrate our commitment to our values. And they will need to be sustained. So they will need to be every day and continue for possibly weeks. So we need to keep the momentum, and we might want to change the place every day. We might want to rotate places and times. We just need to make sure that we keep the momentum going. And we also need to be prepared, as Kifah said, for de-escalation, because the risk for violence is high. Because of Trump's encouragement of the right wing, he said, Proud Boys stand by, and encouragement of state-sanctioned violence. So we need to be sure to be prepared to anticipate some possible escalation. And you can get a training in de-escalation if you sign up at protecttheresults.com. The places where issues are likely to arise are in states where the state officials haven't committed to counting every vote before announcing the results, and in toss-up states where the vote is especially close, or where governors and the state legislatures are aligned with Trump. And so they might want to announce the results quickly, or discount votes, or any other issues might take place. So we need to be prepared to anticipate these issues. And as Kifah said, there are power holders that we will monitor. There are 3 power holders, mainly the local and state election officials. And they have to manage a lot. These are like the supervisor of elections. They are committed. They should be committed to counting every ballot. And they might need support to ensure that they have the time they need. And, those who are not committed to counting every vote will need our pressure. And then there's the state officials and legislators. So these are governors or state legislatures who might feel inclined to cave into the pressure from Trump to overrule. And, we need to let them know that we are watching. And then there's members of Congress. And so if there are any competing results, we need to be prepared to make sure that they are respecting the election results. So those are the 3 main power holders. And I encourage you to, as Kifah said, use the Hold the Line guide to do the power mapping and build the team in your city. Now, if you live in one of those battleground states that I mentioned, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, or Georgia, we need you to sign up to be part of our Rapid Response Integrity Team. Now, this is a part of a group of people, the Fight Back Table, a group of organizations working within these battleground states to make sure that we have people available to take rapid response actions. And they're aligned with the local activists and organizations on the ground. So I will tell you in just a moment how to join that. So first, if you're in any state, attend or host a Protect the Results event. That's protecttheresults.com. And if you're in a target state, you can sign up to join the Rapid Response Team. And if I can, I will have Atia share those links. Okay, great. So I can share those links and share it with your friends in battleground states. We need all the help that we can get. We need help in these battleground states to make sure that we hold our state legislatures and governor and everyone accountable to make sure we count every single vote. And finally, and most importantly, getting out the vote in these final 6 days is how we protect the results. And if we win by a landslide, we may not need to hold the line. So triple your vote. Right now, I want you to pick up your phone and text POWER to 668-366. And again, text POWER to 668-366. And we'll ask you for the names of 3 friends who you will help support to vote. And remember that early voting is already ending in some states. It's ended in Pennsylvania, and it ends in many states very, very soon. So in the next 2 days, we have early voting ending. So vote early if you can, and find your polling location at moveon.org/voting. And again, I'm going to share these links. I'm going to take a quick second So you can protect the results, sign up for a rapid response team, and then finally, moveon.org/voting is where you find your polling place or where you can drop off your ballot. So if you have not dropped off your ballot yet, we need you to drop it off in person. If you've not mailed it in, don't mail it in now. Go to a drop-off location and drop it off in person. So that's all I have. I just really, really encourage everyone, get out there, get out the vote, text as many people as you know in these final 6 days. If we win by a landslide, we won't have to be doing this work. And you don't want to wake up on November 4th regretting that you didn't do all you can to make sure that we win and that we don't have to hold down the line and avoid this, possible scenario. So please help me in getting out the vote. Text POWER to 668-366. Support 3 people to vote with you right now. And that's Your Vote is Power. Oh, wait, I'm confused because I'm seeing myself backwards. All right, Your Vote is Power. Remember, your vote is power. And every single person that you know that is a voter, their power needs to be, amplified. And we need to amplify our power together as a community, inshallah. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nusayba, for sharing. So now we're going to jump into the Q&A. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments and I will read them aloud. We'll also broadcast them on the page. So we have one comment now from Safdar Khwaja. If militias show up and tell poll workers to stop counting ballots, what is the likely recourse?
I think that that's a really important question. So I appreciate you asking that. And I think it's a little bit, so for me as a national organizer, I can't tell you on a local level exactly what your specific context demands, right? But I do think there are a lot of folks who have been thinking about this, especially people who are going to be poll watchers, like, legal observers who will be at the polls. And so one thing that I know Atia actually created too is that if certain things seem unusual or are, you're seeing interferences or intimidation tactics being used at the polls, then CAIR has a resource that they've created. So Atia, do you want to mention that resource that people can report on?
Yes, absolutely. So CAIR has a new voter complaint form that's going to be up for the day of the election. So if you go onto the CAIR website or you go onto muslims.vote, you'll find information about where to submit any issues you have, any complaints that you're experiencing, and your local CAIR chapter will get back to you as soon as they can. So definitely make use of that resource as well. Great. So the next question we have is, if we're planning on attending any actions after the election, how should we prepare to be safe?
One thing we've seen with the national uprising, this political national uprising for Black lives, is that there are a lot of guides out there for how to be safe. And I would say this could be a similar scenario. So, look up those guides. And I know that some of those examples would be definitely have a buddy. Do not go alone. If you're a visibly Muslim woman, make sure that, you have, I would say, a group of folks you're with and that people know where you are, that you're sharing your location with others, and wear sneakers, pay attention to what you're wearing, be alert to what's around you. And if you can, sign up for protecttheresults.com, attend a training, know what to anticipate and how to be alert and what to look out for. And just practice, being safe, knowing your exit routes, knowing where your car is parked. Whatever you might need on you. If you're taking an inhaler, have it on you. Any other medication, have your ID on you. All of those safety measures that you would take at any other event or rally. Take those measures, definitely take them very seriously.
Great. So we have another question, which is, should we petition the PA governor to mobilize National Guard to prevent intimidation in minority areas?
I think you can petition the governor to ensure that every single ballot would be counted. And again, I'd like to turn you to the Hold the Line. You can go to holdthelineguide.com, and on it we have a commitment to uphold democracy campaign plan. And in that campaign plan, you can ask your governor to uphold that every single ballot will be counted. We offer you the exact language that you can use to ensure that those power holders are going to not only count every ballot, but protect people in the state as they should be. So thank you so much, Atiya. So commitment to uphold democracy on holdthelineguide.com. Check it out, that tab right there in the middle. And you can really see that it's important to ask your governor to protect people in the state, right? And it's also important to count every ballot, but like Nusaiba said, things right in the days after the election will be in flux, and you at your local levels can really ensure that people will be protected. And so do all that you can to keep yourself, your community, and people in your state safe. So first ask your governor to make sure that they fulfill their oath, and also keep folks safe in the way that is best suited to your communities. Which might not be, to mobilize the National Guard. So talk to your local organizers about what that looks like.
Great. So the next question was specifically about the CAIR resource for sharing any issues. So the website that you can go to is www.muslims.vote. And you can also check CAIR's Facebook page for any information or Know Your Rights training at the polls issues. We also have another session that we had specifically about Know Your Rights at the polls that you can log on to. So yeah, check out Muslims.vote. That's where all of the resources with information about how to vote, where to vote will be and will live. So definitely check that out. The next question is, where can I look up actions taking place after the election in my community?
Yeah, I'll take that. So go to protecttheresults.com. You'll find a map with all of the actions across the country. They've already planned them out. And if you want to host one, if there isn't an event already happening near you, host one. Definitely, I encourage you to do that. And as Kifah said, you'll be creating a team of people who you can power map with, and who you can, talk to about the potential scenarios, and be prepared and feel really empowered this election. I think that's what's really important, is we need to remember that our communities have power, our votes have power, our voices have power. So sign up at protecttheresults.com and host an event in your city.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our session today. Thank you so much, Nusaiba and Kifah, for jumping on today to educate us and to help us understand our rights in the next coming weeks. And thank you to everyone for logging on and following along with this live stream. So that being said, thank you and Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.